the wonderful Mandy Lehto, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, Mandy, how to be enough, how to feel enough, how to feel that you've got enough in your life, all of those things. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Mandy is our digital columnist on the magazine, Psychologies magazine, and she's doing a 12-month experiment with us to help us with coaching tools, and just really explore this idea of what would it feel like if you felt that you were good enough. I love this, Mandy. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. One of my favorite topics too.
Yeah. So tell me about what inspired the idea for this year-long experiment. Why an experiment about feeling enough?
I think it's something that I've secretly been grappling with for most of my adult life, maybe even earlier. And because it's not a topic we bring up in elevators or at dinner parties or with coffee over friends that often, when this whole vulnerability movement with Brene Brown started, I started to realize, like, oh my God, other people feel like this too. And the more people started to talk about this, the more I started to share this. I brought it to my coaching conversations, and the sunroof on my mind just opened. I thought, wow, this is not just something that I'm grappling with. This is something that so many people are saddled with. So I got really curious on how, by taking baby steps, which is my favorite way of making change, sustainable change happen, what would be possible taking a year, slowing it right down, making it fun, to chunk life down into different segments and play month by month with what it would look like to feel enough in that particular aspect of our lives. So, with well being, with self, body stuff, money, work, all of these different issues. So, I think part of it, to answer your question, it was kind of selfish. I wanted to play
Yeah.
with this for me, but I think change is more fun when we're doing it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why we're delighted that you're leading this for us, because I think you're right. So many of us have that issue around. I mean, I call it imposter syndrome. That so often you see people being all fabulous and and they have no idea that you feel, or that person feels, less than, and not confident at all. I mean, I've coached people, and they're some of the most successful, confident women, seemingly on the outside, but on the inside, I was like, oh, they just feel like I do. And then people see me and think, oh my God, she's the editor of Psychologies. Look how confident she is. And they don't realize that I just feel not good enough and a little bit crap sometimes as well. And so I think the more we can be open to this, open about how we feel, and then look at the strategies that we can use to build ourselves up with, and join, as you say, join together as a group. So I love this experiment idea that we can work together on this. So what's the goal? So after a year, what's the goal at the end of it? Is there a kind of, do we get a badge? Do we get a kind of I am enough badge?
I think it's something that, well, my hope is this, that small steps add up. It's like compound interest on enoughness, that at the beginning, it's really looking to see what's there. And I think once we can acknowledge where we are, say on a scale of 1 to 10, where my enoughness generally sits, and of course that's different for the various parts of our life. Some people might feel completely enough when it comes to work and money, but they might have that people pleaser. Or so overall, I'm hoping that we will increase our enoughness self-rating, and that we'll just generally feel better in our own skin.
Yeah,
And this, going
comfort.
back to Brene, going back to Brene Brown, she had this beautiful quote that something about a recovering overachiever and an aspiring good enoughist. And I love that last bit of the phrase, the aspiring good enoughist. That drops my shoulders 2 inches. So I'm hoping that by the end of 12 months, we can feel like aspiring good enoughists. We can feel good in our own skin. And, spoiler alert, we're already good enough even before beginning this experiment. It's just getting all of that stuff out of the way, including those insidious little pop-up voices that come up constantly to remind us that, we're not adequate in some part of our lives. So I'm hoping that we will get to that place where we can own all of ourselves and feel okay.
I think what's really interesting about what's happening at the moment with the crisis, with the COVID crisis, is I'm having so many conversations with my friends around um, all the nonsense that we have in place to make us feel enough, and so in terms of personal grooming, all our roots are growing out. People who wear fake eyelashes, all their eyelashes have fallen out now. um, all the ways we kind of make ourselves kind of feeling acceptable in the world, all of those have fallen to the wayside because we can't go to the beauty parlor or whatever. So that's just one aspect of it. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, the world didn't fall. The ceiling didn't fall from this. This is great. In terms of work, all the ways that we have our kind of power suits on and we turn up at work. And then what I'm seeing is that people are, we're just turning up, almost with their pajamas on a Zoom call, but realizing none of it matters as long as if you're adding value, with your skills and strengths, none of it matters. So I think it's a very interesting time. I think it's almost like an accelerator. I think we're going to come out of this period, or this is what it feels like, you know, wiser and more comfortable with our own selves. What do you think about that? Do you think that's true, or?
I think this period has been such a simplifier, and so many things that felt important and vital and urgent that we're constantly trying to tug at our shirt sleeves, demanding attention, they've somehow fallen away, as you said, by necessity, because, we can't go and maintain ourselves, groom ourselves, run from one thing to the next thing. It's just everything's gone really quiet. And what I love about this period is the ability to choose. I don't know what's going to happen when normal sets back in, but the ability to choose what we want to spend our time on, our money on, our energy on, and realizing it's so much less, at least it is for me, so much less than what I thought it was before. And it actually feels really good, like once you get over the crunchy ends on your hair or whatever. And
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. It's this idea of bringing that vulnerability piece back in, and there's deep connection to that too, to the imperfection.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, so if people are watching this video and we're sat at home, how can we start, so obviously we can follow the Enough Experiment online. It's at psychologies.co.uk and the link is below. But also, what are some practical strategies that we can start off with, that can help us to begin on this journey?
I'm glad you asked that. So one thing to do is start to think about what would feeling good enough, what would that feel like for you? Because we've all felt that. And one thing that I'm going to invite you to try, even right now as you're listening, is imagine a time when you did feel good enough. So, I mean, there was this time when I was on holiday and there was this perfect blue water and I was reading a really good book and I had beautiful jazz playing in my ears and it was just like this moment of perfect happiness. The sun was setting and I wasn't self-conscious. Like I all the things that I was in that moment. If you start to dissect your moment when you felt, and you might have a couple of them, and you start to see what the common theme is. So in that moment for me, with my book and the sunset and the beautiful blue water and the breeze and all of that, I felt part of something bigger. Being in nature made me feel part of something bigger. I wasn't focused on myself and my own squinchiness and inadequacies. I was focused on something out there. There was a sense of awe. So if
Yeah.
you bring to mind a time when you felt good enough and you start to kind of unpack that and think, what was going on for me in that moment? So those were a few things going on for me. I felt grateful. I had such a deep sense of gratitude and a sense of groundedness and a sense of connection and a sense of awe. So I I can start to develop my own definition of what feeling enough feels like. And it doesn't have to be all those things at the same time,
Yeah.
but there are certain commonalities like the gratitude.
Yeah. Do you think
That's
it's
a big
different for
piece.
everyone? Do you think that, or do you think there's just one? So for me, it's definitely about connection. So sometimes if I'm going to an event, let's say, I get really worried about it, and I think, oh, all these very brilliant and eminent people, who am I, will come up for me, and then and I feel really self-conscious, and I think, oh my god, and you start to worry about what you're going to say, or what you're going to, how you're going to appear. And then as soon as I get there and I start talking to people and really connecting to people, I just think to myself, oh my goodness, I can't believe that I was even thinking that, because it's so for me, when I truly connect with people, all of that drops away, and all of a sudden I feel connected. So connection is huge. Is my number one antidote to
Mm,
feeling good enough. But is that
yeah.
the same for everyone? Or
I think we can only speak for ourselves, right? I think we are all such interesting combinations of experiences, sensations. Our inner critics show up differently, our inner champions show up differently. But from people who have responded so far to the experiment, there are a couple of things that are common. As you said, connection, the idea of gratitude is a big piece. So there are certain what seem like universals. But I think this is part of the experiment. This is what's so fun and juicy about this, is to figure it out for yourself. So that's one thing I would invite people to do, is think about maybe 2 or 3 times when they felt enough, grab a journal or sit there with a cup of tea and stare out into your garden or out at blue sky, and just think, like, what are the common threads between these moments? And then just start to pay attention of how you can bring more of those things into your life. I mean, sometimes it can be that simple, and that's a great starting point. So the second thing is then to start to pay attention what triggers you away from feeling good enough. Like you said, if you go somewhere and there's all these eminent glitterati around you, and then you start to feel self-conscious. So that might be a trigger for you. And then starting to pay attention when your inner critic pop-up comes up in your consciousness, and starting to see, what does it say to you? And it seems like there's a couple of key themes that come up. So my inner critic is not very innovative. It has like 2 or 3 well played hits that come up again and again and again, that tell
yeah,
me that I don't belong here, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm going to say something stupid, or whatever.
yeah,
So you can start to just to familiarize yourself, like, oh yeah, these are the greatest hits of my inner critic. So that's just another thing. What are the kind of situations that makes it pop up? So the starting place is really a piece of awareness of
yes,
how enoughness and moving away from enoughness starts to manifest in your life. That's where I'd start.
yeah. And I suppose once you have that awareness, it's not that I will not go to events because I don't want to feel like that. It's just about noticing the conversation I have. Have you got any advice around how to kind of, when you're in the middle of it? So you might be, and you get triggered by you're not good enough stuff, or not clever enough, or whatever it is for you, not thin enough, not, you know, colorful, whatever it is that you got going on. Have you got any
All
kind
of
of,
the above. Yeah.
yeah, all of the, uh, what what can we do to capture it in the moment, sort of thing? How can we kind of, rather than go into it and it, for me, chunters on for the whole event, rather than kind of nip it in the bud there and then? How can we just become more aware in the
Mm.
moment, or find an antidote in that moment? I suppose that's part of the experiment. That's what we're learning about. But is there anything? Can you give us a cheat guide, basically?
The
Is there anything that really works in that moment for
it
you?
sounds stupid
Obviously, that we
simple.
can try.
Yeah, it sounds stupid simple,
Yes.
but one of the things that works for me, and you'll have to experiment whether it works for you, I just imagine pressing like a big red stop button to stop it. And once I've stopped it, I take a breath. And it doesn't need to be like a big dramatic yoga breath where you close your eyes and put your hand to your chest. I mean, you could do that if you wanted to, but sometimes, like if you're in the midst of a dinner party, back in the days when we could have dinner parties or at a networking event, it's just stop and then take that breath. And I just check in, like, what's the unmet need I have in this moment? And the more you start to do that before you get into a situation, the quicker this becomes. Like, it feels really clunky at the beginning, and I fail at this still on a regular basis, although I think about this all the time. But it's
Yeah.
just stop, pause, and just check in, like, what's going on for me? What's the unmet need? It's like, oh, I feel a little bit inadequate because I'm not dressed the way that everybody, you turn up at a
Yeah.
party and everybody's dressed to the nines and you're kind of smart casual. So it's just like, oh, when I notice that, oh, okay. And then I can relax into it. It tends to pop up less, but it's really the stop, pause, check. And by check, I mean check in, go inwards just for a moment, just to figure out what is it in this moment that is going on for me.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm going to try that. And again, I mean, I love this idea of experiment. I think that once you bring it to the surface of awareness and you look perhaps how that drives your behavior and makes you miserable, basically, it makes you so miserable. This whole conversation about not feeling good enough. Although Jane's saying here, I prefer to say to myself, I am not good enough. It then pushes me to get better. And I absolutely understand what she means by that. Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
Jane. But it's that thing of, I worry that if I just, my thing is, okay, I'm just going to let it all hang out. I'm just going to let my roots grow out. I'm not going to paint my nails. I'm just, and my fear is that I will turn into this kind of, um, that I won't be of use to the world at all. I won't, I will spiral down into some very unproductive state. So I feel that kind of the not good enough stuff kind of pokes me and keeps me going. What would you say to that?
I learned something from a fellow coach recently that really rocked my world, and something that I haven't brought to the experiment yet, but this is a great place to do it. The difference between discipline and devotion. And I'm not talking about devotion in a religious sense here, although if that's what works for you, feel free to interpret it that way. But the way that Jane describes it here is not good enough as a kind of driver. That kicks in. I don't know how it sits for you, Susie, but that kicks in my discipline. It's like I need to stop eating so many
Yes.
crisps, or
Yeah.
when I find
Yeah.
myself shoving more chocolate in my mouth,
Yeah.
then I need to bring more discipline to it. And that works. Historically, that has worked for me. But I also find in the experiment of being kinder to myself and really accepting myself how I am in this moment doesn't necessarily require me to have discipline, or, it doesn't mean I'm going to let it all hang out either. But it's bringing devotion. Devotion for me has a completely different, softer, more encompassing, more loving and self-compassionate feeling to it than discipline does.
Yeah.
And the beauty of this experiment is that everybody can work on how it works for them.
Yeah.
But for me, for somebody who was so hyper disciplined, which still never got me to a place of enoughness for
Yeah.
me, the
Yeah.
idea of leaning more into devotion. I'm devoted to acknowledging my enoughness, whether I'm eating the crisps and sitting in my track pants, with my roots showing, or, whatever in this
Yeah.
moment, that I'm still enough. And there's the devotion and the dedication and the consistency of that enoughness that makes me feel softer and more in integrity than discipline ever did. That's personal. It might be very different for everyone else, but that distinction feels really good for me, the distinction between discipline and devotion.
I love that distinction. I might nick that. You see, I'm
Mm.
pleased I asked that question. It's really good. So this is the wonderful Mandy Lehto, who is going to be going on this journey with us, of how to feel enough. She's leading the experiment please join her. She will be leading this in the Psychologies Connected community, and also in the Life Leap community, which is our subscriber community. So if you haven't subscribed to Psychologies yet, do subscribe, because there's free courses, there's all sorts of things, and I think it's a fantastic offer at the moment. 3 issues for £5. You can't go wrong. Let's get that plug in, Mandy. But Mandy, thank you so much for your time and your energy. And I'm just loving the enough experiment. As I say, even if I have been working on myself for probably 30 years, that one still comes up a lot. And it's good to, it feels like, to get a handle on it and also have a sense of humor about it as well as we go along. And I think if we can bring it to the surface for so many of us, especially women, I think have this thing going on, then I think we can create a support network for us all to hold our heads up hand, hold out each other's hands, and go, come on,
Yeah, I
enough
agree.
is our birthright.
It
Yeah.
absolutely is. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking
Thank you,
forward
my
to getting into
darling.
this.
Speak to you soon. Bye bye. Bye bye.